Hi, everyone. Stuart Gandalf here. Welcome to our podcast. Today, we're interviewing Breanna Hunt, who is founding partner at HealthReach LLC. And we were just talking offline a little bit ago. I saw Breanna speak at a conference recently about medical device, which was an excellent conference, by the way. And I love that we have so much in common. She was talking about DTC marketing, but it was from a little bit different vantage point, talking about how to do DTC if you're in a more of a device kind of environment, to change that mindset, which actually some of our clients are doing that right now. But Breanna, before we get into all that, tell me, we're just talking about how did you even get into this device marketing stuff?
Yeah, so I've got 17 years experience in performance marketing, leading customer acquisitions and digital campaigns. And I entered device marketing after a stint at a .com and then a financial services company 7 years ago. And a recruiter just had reached out to me on LinkedIn and told me about an innovative therapy that helps people with chronic pain. And at that time, my family was dealing with a family member who had very severe chronic pain. And so I was just blown away that there could be a technology out there that hadn't been discussed that could really help my family member. And so it really became a passion project for me to enter the healthcare space and help more patients and families like mine that just weren't aware that these therapies existed. And there was just so much room for education and really getting people to advocate for themselves.
Oh, that's great. It's funny. I think a lot of people would be surprised if they're not in our space. How many people that are doing marketing activities, they're not clinicians, but just want to help, that want to be
Yeah.
part of helping people get better. And that's really common. I would say, in fact, at least from my experience, I don't know what you've seen, Brianna, but probably more than half the people, when I ask them on an interview, why do you want to work for our company? It's about the passion for healthcare. And I'm like,
Yeah.
cool. So,
Yeah, it's a challenging industry. There's a lot of special dynamics that go into it. And it makes it, Simon Sinek, talks about what's your why. And that's really been my why, is, understanding that there's technologies out there that you've never heard of before that can really make such an impact on your quality of life. And so I got really excited about being in this space. And, I too, when I'm interviewing people, love to hear that there's, a passion behind helping patients get better outcomes than they've traditionally gotten.
yeah, for sure. So your background is in device, and it's funny because people, our listeners that know us well, we do a device, pharma, and a whole bunch of providers more often. And so a lot of things that we take for granted in that space is a little different than device. And in fact, some of our device clients have issues I think we're going to talk about today, getting used to changing the mindset. And so first of all, let's start off by just explaining, take a step back and just what is DTC healthcare marketing, and how does that different from traditional marketing, from healthcare marketing, from your point of view?
Yeah, so direct to consumer healthcare marketing refers to marketing strategies directly aimed at patients or consumers. So, unlike traditional marketing, which primarily targets healthcare providers and focus on influences decision making, DTC healthcare marketing speaks directly to the patient and involves educating about conditions and treatment options and getting them to advocate for themselves so that they can come in and have all the information they need and potentially even find a provider in their area. Because it's so common that, a provider, your current provider may not be offering all the latest therapies. So you may have to drive a little ways or, explore a different care plan in order to get access to a treatment. And it typically involves direct to consumer, typically involves digital channels like social media, search engines, and patient centric websites, which really capture the patient's attention and speak their language and their pain points. It's often not about the technology or very complicated language. It's about making it really easy to digest and short clips. They say consumers, have about a 7-second attention span. And so, you've got to really grab their attention quickly and get them into action to move forward down the treatment path. I like to say often patients don't like to learn a whole bunch about a therapy before they know if they're qualified. The first step is, is this potentially right for me? And then I'll dig in and learn about it. And so it's kind of flipping the funnel a little bit from traditional healthcare marketing, which says, okay, put a bunch of content out there. And then, the doctor has all of the background. You just have to, really check your assumptions because the patient knows, often nothing about the treatment option.
I like that. That's actually a really good point for sure. And we always, oftentimes when working with different teams, we talk about, okay, first of all, what is this? What does it do? Why should I care?
Yeah.
Right. And then why should I choose this particular thing? So that's a really good way of looking at the same thing. That's awesome. I alluded to something which wasn't on our sort of pre-checklist, but I'm seeing this a lot. Tell me about your insights of with device, especially if they've been doing sort of traditional HCP marketing. Um, some of the challenges or opportunities in convincing them to go to DTC, because sometimes it's a whole different culture, and I'm curious what your
Yeah.
experience has been.
Yeah, it is a whole different culture. Patients, or excuse me, people who are providing DTC strategy and consulting, or are running the programs internally, are often a team of one. Where they're working with colleagues that might have bigger teams. It can be a little bit more focused around consumer marketing. And so in terms of convincing an organization, that's where internal leadership support is absolutely critical, that there's a belief around the ability to go to consumers and get them to advocate for themselves will make a really big difference in the growth trajectory of the company. And so some of the things that, I like to look at is there an accessible patient population? Can you actually reach these patients through some of these digital channels? Is there broad healthcare coverage? Because your metrics can get really skewed if you're going after a device that doesn't have broad healthcare coverage. And then again, is there leadership support? So I was very fortunate to come into Nevro where the belief story was sold in, and they hired specifically for a growth marketer to come in and execute this. So I learned from some really good peers how to sell in the idea of direct to consumer. And it has to come from the top down. The CEO interviewed me, and was very engaged in, direct to consumer as a marketing channel, and supported the resources that it took to build that out, including building a team around it.
Great. Let's take a step back and because you mentioned the product, which I hadn't gotten to yet. What product are you working on these days, and and what does it do, and why is it? I'd love to know more about that.
Sure. So currently, I've got a healthcare marketing consultancy where I'm helping med device companies through direct consumer marketing. My background worked in the chronic pain space. I worked at Nevro for 7 years and helped patients with chronic pain get relief through an implantable medical device. So that's where the bulk of my experience comes from.
Great. All right. Excellent. And then so we talked about culture, which is a big deal. And culture, by the way, is I really am just now figuring this out in my life, how important culture is, because to me, marketing is like, it's what you do. It's just as you walk across the street. It's not something you even give a second thought to. But a lot of companies are very skeptical about marketing of any kind, let alone D2C, in a culture that's been very scientifically driven and very much driven towards um, HCP marketing. So beyond the culture, or in addition to culture, I guess, what advice would you give to HCP or healthcare companies rather that are just beginning to explore DTC marketing?
So it really starts with a deep understanding of the audience, their preferences, their pain points. Building really a patient-centric approach is critical, and learning to speak in their voice, which is often a big change. Voice is a really interesting thing when you actually put pen to paper and you figure out what language people use that really activates them to move forward. So primary research is incredibly critical, and we did a ton of this at Nevro. And so I came into an organization that had a deep understanding of the patient and we were able to then build out a content engine to deliver on their needs and support their education and empowerment. And so that's really the first thing, is making sure that you can build content that speaks in the patient's voice and really understands their pain point. Additionally, I talked a little bit about the short attention span. The messaging has to be clear. It has to really quickly explain, what is this, what does it do, and who is it for? Without those kind of key points in, the first 5 to 30 seconds of a video clip, you're going to lose people. They don't, you can eventually get into some of the other features, but it's really important. And then finally, one of the things that I talk to a lot of companies about is that this is a long game. Getting somebody from a Facebook ad to, say, an implantable medical device is a long journey. And so be prepared to iterate and test. And we'll talk a little bit more about this, but you're probably not going to knock it out of the park and get the lowest cost per lead on your first campaign. It takes a lot of time to figure out what that voice is. And so, having a team that can come up with hypotheses and test them and be comfortable being wrong is really important, because this is developing a new skill and a new muscle. I've found that, you can't just, swap, somebody who's got a lot of experience in HCP into consumer. Bringing somebody in who really understands the consumer mindset is really important. And so building out that team from the start and being prepared to iterate and learn is really important.
Yeah, it's really funny. I love that about the setting the expectation. And one of the things I use a lot of metaphors, Breanna, and one of the things I say is, like, we might hit a grand slam on that first pitch, but we're not going to. And if that's because when I hear people say things like, well, how many, let's say we're 2 or 3 months into this, we haven't got any results yet. Like, we shouldn't do this.
Yeah.
If you have that kind of a short-term time frame, especially for anything you're pioneering, innovating, there has to be more commitment to that. It doesn't mean you have to go on forever. And it doesn't, but if we're already looking for I always say, if we're looking for the exits before we begin, I'm worried.
Yeah.
I'm not sure this is for you. So
I completely agree with that. And I think that there are, I love doing pilots and feasibility and finding out, okay, can we, is there an addressable patient population, and can we get leads? But leads is very different than getting patients, into a practice. And so, it's one of those things where setting your metrics early and saying, okay, what does success look like? And it may not be, revenue right off the bat, because again, that's going to take time, but really understanding your funnel and being able to measure, okay, what does success look like for a 3-month pilot? And then what does scale look like?
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting too, because there's different models. I mean, sometimes we're doing DTC and the doctors are going to be integrally involved, the individual practices, right? Because they have to be involved. Other times, not as much. But again, it's just a lot figuring out that. And I love the addressable market. I think that's what grabbed my attention when you were speaking, because that's so our experience as well. Is like, is there a market for it? A lot of times there is. And you have to think about those kinds of questions we can solve up pretty quickly. And I'm sure you would agree.
Yeah.
So, because if it's not an addressable market, or sometimes I always say, and see if you agree with this, that it's a continuum, right? Some things are just completely HCP driven. It's just way too technical for a consumer to care or understand or know, where that is in the pipeline. But on the other side, there are a lot of things that can be very consumer direct, and so it's like figuring out where that sweet spot is. As we're approaching this, I think we're going down the path here perfectly. What are the critical steps that for launching a DTC? Like, if you said, okay, if someone calls you and says, we know how to spell DTC, but other than that, I'm not sure what to do.
Yeah. So, first we talked about research and audience segmentation, and this doesn't have to be big and expensive, but really spending some time. I love patient journey maps and really understanding the patient pathway. That's one of the like MVPs that I like to do for starting a DTC program. And then, understanding, that this is the less sexy part of healthcare, but who are your regulatory and compliance partners, and make friends. This is, get them involved early in the process, start to initiate them in, what is direct to consumer marketing and what does this program look like in the future, from just a broad strokes perspective so that they feel included and you're starting to set up the processes in order to get regulatory review. And that you understand what the company's appetite for marketing is and messaging is, because you don't want to do this at the end where you've created this big blockbuster breakthrough campaign and your regulatory and legal folks say, no, this isn't aligned to, what we're looking to do. Again, the tone is different. The messaging is different. It's shorter. You're putting ads out on search, and so, even how you do disclaimers can really impact the format of your ads. So make friends with your legal and regulatory folks, make them your partners, and bring them along on the journey. And then start to develop your content. That content that's exciting. It could even be funny, it educates, informs. It's got to have thumb-stopping power. Content is still king. And with the targeting and the platforms and, and the ability to, target broad groups, you've got to really have your messaging speak to the patient and go back to your research that you've done to figure out, what is the right content, whether that's ads, websites, at minimum, testimonials, email, nurturing, SMS, all of those different, content development. And then as you're doing that in parallel, your channel selection, are you going to be on Facebook? Are you going to be on Instagram? Are you going to be doing Google? This helps also inform your content strategy. So really looking at your channel selection. And then, you get to your launch and promotion steps and actually, the exciting day where you actually get to launch everything and hit go. And then, that's really ensuring the messaging and seamless patient experience. And, just a hard-learned tidbit there is check your analytics early. Make sure you're tracking everything so that you can answer your question and develop new hypotheses. So really make sure that all of your web analytics and your CRM analytics and everything is working as expected, because you don't want to get, 3 months down the road and realize you didn't collect the data you need. And then data monitoring and optimization. This is a passion of mine. I started my career in data and analytics, digital data and analytics. And, you get a voice at the table when you understand the data. You can explain how it was collected. You understand the privacy landscapes to make sure that data isn't being stored in systems that, it shouldn't be and that it's being used correctly. But you really do get a seat at the table when you say, okay, I launched this campaign. This is, how people are engaging with it, whether that be clicks or conversion rates. This is how, many people I'm getting from leads. This is how many people I was getting on the phone, and eventually, this is how many people actually went into a practice and got the procedure. So really deeply understanding your funnel and starting to tweak those levers can have big differences. You really want to understand every stage of the funnel so that you can speak to it and speak to your partners, empower your partners. In my role in the past, I haven't been the one running the call center, but if I can feed them the data about how their teams are managing the calls, from a patient navigator program, that gives them the insights and how to optimize the program on their end. So it's really, set the data free and allow your partners across the funnel to really use that information to make better decisions.
I love it. And it's so funny. So much of what you're talking about is exactly the same things we talk about when we work with providers. Like, for example, the call center is so vital. And, I want to bang that drum for the rest of my career. I've been doing it since I started in this world, and it's like, it just never is easy. So another thing that's like, that I think was really interesting is your discussion about building trust with
Mm.
consumers. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So, there's so much advertising out there for, products that don't have the FDA regulations and the rigor that has gone into medical device. And so you really have to set yourself apart as, a device that, or a therapy that has been well tested and clinically proven. And in our space, we really have access to a lot of that good data. And so providing educational content that makes it really user friendly. I love using tables, that really show, that it's easily consumable information, very digestible. And then I absolutely love and have been blessed with in my career incredible patient testimonials. This is, life-changing information about what a patient had experienced and then getting the therapy and then their life today. And, this is your classic marketing before and after, but in patient testimonials, they're emotional, they're relatable, and you can't do enough of them. And the trick is figuring out a way to get that partnering again with your sales organization because they're the ones seeing these incredible outcomes and feeding that into marketing. So patient testimonials really help educate and answer the question, is this for me? And when you can look at a patient testimonial and say, yes, I, just want to be able to walk my dog. I just want to go to the mailbox. I just want to be able to do these things. But, maybe I've tried treatments X, Y, and Z. And now I tried this and I actually am able to do that. It's just incredibly powerful. So building a patient testimonial engine is critical. The other things that I'd recommend is data privacy. We did a lot of testing and optimization about, if you're going to use a very common tactic of using an assessment on a website, is let the person know exactly how you're using that data and why you're asking those questions. So bring data privacy, follow all the rules and regulations, but go a step further and really tell the patient how you're using that data, and so that they're comfortable giving it to you and completing those steps of the assessment to find out if they're qualified. That made a huge difference in our conversion rates when we kind of took it out of a black box and really brought that forward. And then we've talked a little bit about it, but those nurse navigators, those coach programs have responsive customer support. When you've got a patient who maybe saw an ad on Facebook and raised their hand that they want more information at 3 a.m. in the morning because they're dealing with symptoms, having a friendly voice, text them, the next day and call them and say, I'm here to answer your questions and help connect you with a provider is a game-changing part of this because it's frankly, I wouldn't say it's always easy, but it's solvable in order to get leads in the top of the funnel. But actually getting a patient into a practice is really challenging. And that's where having that trusted person is really so critical. So, and it's about developing a relationship. I love, being able to connect patients with a person who remains their point of contact, that's in their, in their local area or supports their local area. That's really the best approach possible.
Outstanding. This is excellent. Really good stuff. We talked about some of the challenges previously for, launching DTC, but in addition to the cultural challenge, and maybe not having enough budget or long-term viewpoint, it's pretty common.
Yeah.
Any other ones that you can think of, or you can expand on those if you like?
Sure. So regulatory compliance is and the systems required to get something approved is one of the big challenges. It can lead to frustration, team conflict, burnout. I've seen models of all of this. And so really understanding the process and even if possible, if you've got a good relationship with your partners, doing pre-review before you put it in your MLR systems so that you can get that live feedback and not have to iterate and, what can be a clunky system, figure out a way that it works for both partners. But again, bringing those regulatory partners along, just knowing that, that can be a challenge. Another area is messaging. From a process standpoint, having a claims matrix that's been pre-approved can make a world of difference when you understand where the guardrails are. And so, having a process where you're regularly reviewing the claims and the messages across all the parties and one call at the same time and saying, okay, this message was blessed on this day by everyone in the meeting, legal, regulatory, compliance, so that then, you're not having one-off conversations where, it may not pass the temperature test, so somebody just denies it. You can have a more active conversation and you build that library over time. So you can always go back to that well. That was a big difference for me than in my previous consumer roles where I never had to really get every message and sometimes every word approved. But it can be really valuable discussions when you do that regulatory and claims matrix. Patient private. Oh, yep.
I'm sorry. I thought you were pausing. Go ahead.
I was moving on to the next one. Did you have a comment on that one?
No, I just thought the regulatory part is such a vital part, and I agree. If you're outside of healthcare, it's just a whole new world, right? It's fine. I've worked in finance before, which has plenty of regulation, but healthcare is even more. So I totally agree. But continue.
Yes. So the next big one I would say is patient privacy and really understanding the privacy landscape. This is, again, making friends with your legal teams. And I would recommend everybody in digital marketing, even if you're not consider yourself like a digital analyst, to take a course on cookies and tracking tools and deeply understand what data is being collected and how it's being collected. It's all very transparent and quite I wouldn't say easy to understand, but once you understand the mechanics of how something like a Google Analytics works or a Meta conversion pixel works, then you're not relying on other people or get potentially surprises. So I've gone through several privacy audits, and I've actually become a partner in those privacy audits to explain exactly what I'm tracking, how it's being collected, pulling up a screen, and you got to get into code, but that's the day and age for marketers. Don't be afraid of code, and really understand what the tracking tag is doing in all of the settings. And be willing to know that your regulatory team may restrict some of the information that you can collect, and be willing to test and optimize and work around that. I like to say, okay, if we turn off, data collection setting X, it may have this impact on our conversion rate. We're going to do it on, this day and we're going to test it, but be really open to the reality of healthcare. You may not get everything as optimized and tracked as you want it to, but the more you understand about your data collection, the more trust your partners will have that you're not just relying on an outside vendor or somebody else that doesn't have the same responsibility as the internal stakeholder. And then the other challenge that I would say is measuring ROI. This one is different for every company and really gets to what data you have available, how much trust you've built with your partners. But some companies are actually able to track who gets the final procedure and can tie that back to how did they enter into the system? What campaign did they enter into? Even down to what creative they entered into. Some companies are selling in bulk and it's just materials on the shelf and they don't have that same visibility to the end procedure. So tracking ROI can be a lot harder. But this is a big challenge to really understand what is possible and building trust with your partners so that you can get access to the final procedure data, if at all possible, to really understand the impact to your programs.
Great. Well, you brought up a couple of things that are really vital. We talked about the regulation a lot, and as well as the data analytics. And I would tell, or add to perhaps what you were just saying, that for people on the outside of this to really fully understand how deep the analytics rabbit hole can go and how deep it needs to go. And I've got to applaud you for something that philosophically I'm big on, which is to learn all this stuff. Don't rely on everybody else for everything, right? Because then you're stuck in a meeting and if you don't really understand what's going on, it's really hard to defend what you're doing.
It's nearly impossible,
Yeah.
and you lose the trust of your partners, very quickly.
Right. So it's okay to have experts you work with, but you really need to understand it. And that's just that pursuit of continuing education. I love that you're doing, because that's something, if you look at my wall, even not so many books buying new, because at least the hard version, they're always on or Audible. But, I just believe in continuing ed forever. And it's like, it used to be these big, broad principles, but now things like deep dives into an analytics tool or understanding how something works is really, really important. And it's a huge part of what we do, which leads me to my last question today, about the role of digital transformation and how does that play into the evolution of healthcare marketing? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, it's absolutely huge. I mean, this is what enables us to collect the information, the systems that allow us to collect the information and all of the digital tools. So, everything from the advanced analytics to, understanding your marketing efforts. And I've seen this, being at a company for 7 years, and seeing how everything from their sales enablement and CRM and MLR, to use a lot of different acronyms, but all of these systems have to talk nicely together. And again, this goes back to understanding the data, the structure, and the questions you're trying to answer, and being able to build systems that effectively, again, free the data so that, there's not one person that just has, visibility into the full funnel, but anybody with, a cursory knowledge of, the business questions can go in and answer that. And so being able to have systems that talk well to each other, that then can be fed into a data visualization tool, like, for example, Tableau or one of these others, so that business users can then, really understand, okay, if I'm running the customer experience team, can I go in and see how my nurse navigators are actually, connecting with patients and qualifying patients, and find, okay, well, there's variability from person X to person Y, why is that? And dig in. That's absolutely huge, and is all enabled through the digital transformation. So really being able to have an understanding of the data architecture and really feeding in good information, and then being able to present that to business users, again, builds trust.
Outstanding. Anything else that you'd like to talk about today? Because I know we had a couple questions prepared about regulation and also analytics, but I think you covered those pretty well. But anything else that you would like to discuss today that you think is sort of parting thoughts for people contemplating this or looking to do things better?
Yeah. So, I've developed a patient maturity audit. And I think really understanding your readiness for direct to consumer and where your blind spots are helps you, navigate that quicker. So, if you're interested in understanding where are you at today and where best in class companies are and kind of what that pathway looks like, doing something like a DTC maturity audit can have a really big impact and help you talk to your stakeholders and your partners about why it's important to have the regulatory pieces in place, have the content pieces in place, have the privacy pieces in place. And so, that's something that I would recommend for people looking to get started in direct to consumer.
Okay, so how do they get that?
Yeah. So, I am doing consulting now and helping companies, specifically starting in the med device, start DTC programs or optimize their existing programs. So you can reach out to me at Breanna at HealthReachLLC.com, my new consulting company, or go to my website, HealthReachLLC.com as well.
Great. Awesome, Breanna. That was fun. I enjoyed it. It was those were like-minded colleagues in the battle of healthcare marketing, I think.
Absolutely. No, this is fun. It's always great to, dig into this stuff and, put it all together.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.